Welcome to this week's End of Days Update, coming to you from sunny Orlando, Florida. We had such a great time in Christ Chapel Church this last weekend. Folks were so hungry. It seems like it's getting easier and easier to get into the coming of the Lord because we are so close to Jesus coming back. It's remarkable to have every single week, have verse after verse after verse come to pass while we're alive. Pretty amazing. Hey, if you're anywhere near Fort Smith or Alma, Arkansas this weekend, we'll be at Beyond Church Sunday morning, Sunday night, and then Monday night. And then we'll head down to Fort Worth on Tuesday, and we'll go to Crosswalk Church Tuesday through Friday of next week. We'll have a great time. It'll be Joseph Roberts Ministries. We'll be with Ross Roberts, Dustin Martin. We'll be with everybody. We'll have a great time. We'll have a blowout. Those are the funnest, craziest meetings you ever get in, so we'll go for it. Well, we're coming to you every week to look at the different things that point to the coming of the Lord, and specifically the gathering of nations for the Ezekiel 38 war, because we know the rapture of the church is signless, but the second coming has tons of signs. So what can we look at right now to show us we're near the catching away of the saints? And there's a lot of weird preaching now on the rapture, saying the rapture's not going to happen. But if you understand dispensationalism, you'll understand the church age is here now. God's given the church all authority. He has to take the church off the earth so the Antichrist can even be revealed. And that's what Paul said in Thessalonians. So we're watching the setup for Jesus to present himself to his brethren, just like Joseph did at the very end. So let's pick up with what's happened around Israel. So much stuff is going on. You had 6 more murders with ISIS and the Palestinians working together in Israel. That's 11 Israelis in the last week. It's weird to see an uptick in that. You got Hamas quoting this week, we're ready to go to war with Israel again. It's weird when you see other nations going to war. It almost brings upon these other guys to get nuts as well, but they've always been nuts. I like what they said about the Palestinians. The Palestinians have never missed an opportunity to miss opportunities for peace. But anyway, the big thing, of course, is Russia in the Ukraine. It's interesting to see the different reviews of what you hear. Generals say that Russia's almost done. Russia's moving toward the eastern part of the Ukraine, but yet they say that Putin could go kind of crazy and do even crazier stuff. You had 2 hypersonic missiles misfire this week. And so you had those thermobatic bombs being bombed by Putin. Who does that to civilians? Who does that to children's homes and hospitals? It's absolutely insane. But you're getting a picture of what the Antichrist will be like, where death doesn't mean anything to them, like a beast. That's why it's called the mark of the beast. They feel no remorse. One thing was that happened in Russia, in Chernobyl, that kind of freaked me out was it looks like a lot of equipment and a lot of atomic equipment was stolen from Chernobyl. And that was the big deal years ago. I talked to a commander in the Navy, and he said, hey, we're not concerned about Iran really firing nukes at Israel. We're concerned about that one suitcase nuke that gets down into Damascus and that comes into Israel. And that's what you're seeing with particles being stolen that kind of go to the black market. So that's the thing to be concerned about. But there's so much more happening. There's a little bitty intriguing peace accords happening all over the world, all at the same time with the same ending. You had Israel do another summit right there in the Negev Desert. You had the leaders from Bahrain, Morocco, United Arab Emirates. It's kind of wild to have those countries in Israel having a summit. What would make them go to that extreme to come to Israel and go to the land to do that? Iran. They're trying to restart the Iranian negotiations because the nuclear agreement is so bad. It's so hideous. Even every side of the aisle in America is saying this will not work because it's so horrible. Remember we talked about they let cameras go back in there, but then they won't be able to look at the video. So it's gotten so weird that the United States Defense Department came out this last week with basically a bounty on someone in Israel. If you can come up with someone in Israel showing they mistreated someone else, they'll give them $1 million. So as crazy as that is, you had Emmanuel Macron, France's president, come in and try to sow some discord that happened with our president saying that Putin's going to have to leave. Then they backpedaled from that. But it's weird to see France's president come in and start talking about that. You got more happening. You got mines going out into the sea off of the Sea of Turkey. You have Turkey doing negotiations now with Russia. That's a big deal because Russia is going to grab Turkey and grab Iran and come down to Israel right after the rapture of the church. So what you're watching is a setup for the king to come back. I mean, it's every single week there's one thing after another, little bits and pieces that are like, okay, Jesus is about to come back to the planet. Why? These are symptoms of the tribulation period. It's not the tribulation because we're just before Jesus said there'd be birth pains, or we'd call it contractions, and you're watching the contractions right now. So amazing to see piece by piece come together. I think there's going to be a lot done on the West Bank really soon. There's going to be some flare-ups there. There's going to be more flare-ups about the Temple Mount. You got some archaeological things that came out this last week showing showing a tie to Israel and a tie to the land for thousands of years. There'll be more of that coming out as well, and we'll talk about it every single week. So what we do, we always go to the Scripture. These things are all happening right in front of our eyes. What's the Bible say? Number one, Israel made a nation. Number two, Jerusalem won back. Jesus said, the generation that sees those two events will not pass away till all is fulfilled. But then you got the Hebrew language restored. You got the Ethiopian Jews brought back. You got the fertility of the land of Israel. You have the revival of the Roman Empire. You have all these things. You have the Temple Mount Institute. You have all these groups and all these things coming together that the Bible said you'd see just before God comes to the planet. How wild to be able to physically see it. It's cool in a service. I'll say one of those things, and one of the younger people will Google it, and they'll come up to me afterwards and go, actually, I Googled it. It's actually there. Like I would make that up. That's crazy. No, these are absolutely blatantly happening right in front of our eyes. But you got predatory birds, 172 different species. You had, this is the crazy one, you had fish show up in the Dead Sea. Ezekiel prophesied that 2,700 years ago. The crazy thing was, this last year, 6 weeks ago, the Dead Sea turned blood red where Sodom and Gomorrah is. And not only that, it did that on the Day of Atonement. I told the Lord, I said, wow, you're just showing off now. So you got foxes on the Temple Mount. You have all these things pointing to the coming of the Lord. You had amazing that you had those two guys from Russia and from the Ukraine trying to have a peace meeting. Come to find out they were poisoned by Russian agents. So you got a lot of stuff happening with the signs that are happening. You got signs that didn't just happen 20 years ago or 30 years ago. You got signs that happened last week. So you have all these things coming together to show us how close we are. I like one of them is men will be lovers themselves. We have selfie sticks. How crazy is that? There's event after event after event. You had the History Channel come up with Bishop Malachi showing that the Pope, the Bishop Malachi had a vision of every single Pope and their coat of arms. He got 114 coat of arms out of 114 popes. Pretty crazy. The History Channel called it statistically impossible. Only a God can do that. Well, guess what Pope we have right now is the 114th. So with all of that, you got the Abraham Accords pushing Jews and Arabs coming together, which is another sign in itself. But you have locusts down on the bottom part of South Africa. You've got different kind of things that happen with scorpions in Egypt stinging people. You got big sandstorms covering areas of Spain. So you got things that are biblical, just like in the Old Testament, that are pointing to the coming of the Lord. So we get into that because you check your list off and go, wow, that's happening, that's happening, that's happening, that's happening, because Jesus is about to come back. You're living in the day where the King's to be magnified. We're about to go to the coronation of the King. Well, he'll be presented to us as the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Wow. He's the brightness of the glory of God. How wild that he died for us and he's coming back. So all these signs point to it. And then you have signals. You had the blood red moons on Passover and Tabernacles. Radical. When's the last time you had 4 in a row on Passover and Tabernacles? It's absolutely amazing. Last time, 1967 when Jerusalem was won back. 1948 when Israel was made a nation. 1492 at the Edict of Expulsion when the Jews were kicked out of Spain. So you have all of that coinciding with the heavenly activity. Along with that, you got the Bethlehem star, Jupiter, Regulus, and Venus. How crazy to have the Bethlehem star. When Jesus is born, the constellation was Virgo. NBC Nightly News said we have a celestial event. We got Jupiter, we got Regulus, we got Venus. Wow, Bethlehem star. First time in 2,000 years. What was the constellation? Leo. He's the lion of the tribe of Judah. Many more things happening with the heavens. You got asteroids. You got wormwood. NASA labeled it wormwood coming in 2029. That you'll be visible in 2027, 2028, just before the Lord comes back. So before the second coming. So this is it. Everybody goes, well, have we got 20 or 30 years left? When you do all the math, it's pretty much right now. We're in the season of his return. I can't tell you the exact date, but I can tell you, you're watching it unfold, that the rapture of the church is not that far off. And then you have 7 years of tribulation. Then we come back with Jesus at the second coming. Man, what an exciting time. Scary for the world, zero scary for the church. If you listen to end time teaching and it scares you, it's bad news. It's not Bible. There is no bad news for the church. You're living when men will be lovers themselves and that people would have itching ears, but yet you're hearing the word. You're in church every week. So push through all those negatives that are here for the last days and let's harvest as much as we can. Let's get as many souls as we can. So what do? Help our local church. Help our local pastor get the message out. The King's coming back. Man, come back this next week. I know we have a lot of things happening with Turkey, with Russia, and with China as well. China doing crazy things. North Korea doing crazy things this last week. Wow, you're living just before the King comes. Have a blessed week. We'll see you next Wednesday.
Thanks for joining us today at the End of Days Update. If you'd like to be notified every time there's a new post, just go to the edu at josephmorris.com and subscribe to receive email alerts. If these posts and updates have been a blessing to you, please consider making a one-time donation to help get the message out, or even becoming a monthly partner with Joseph Morris Ministries. Thanks again for tuning in to the EDU, and we'll see you next week.